Welcome to the Leadership Journal with your hosts, Nick Helgett and Robbie Woodard,
where we cover our journey, struggles, and obstacles that we have overcome, and moments in our careers that have led to growth. Here on Table Talk each week, where we break down various topics and journals of our trials and tribulations.
All right, everybody, welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Journal with your hosts, Nick Helgett, Robbie Woodard, and Jed Stoltz. Today's topic is going to be motivation. Motivation is a multifaceted topic. It's going to be an interesting one because it comes from. I'd like us to focus on first a little bit of self motivation. What motivates you to be a leader, and then how does that motivation translate into your team? What do you want for your team? How does that play out? What theories do you use to guide yourself to push to that next level, to push your team to that next level, and to motivate them in a positive way?
So I'll go first. I don't normally go first, but I'll kick us off.
You know what? You should go first.
Thank you, Nick. I will. When I think about motivation, one of my favorite things is when I was a team member. Now, granted, like we've covered a couple times, I was not in the hourly ranks for a very long time. I was only an hourly team member for about 2 years. If you count my first job, I was about 3 years in total as an hourly team member before I became an hourly supervisor. Then I was an hourly supervisor for about 3 years before I became a manager, and I did that for a little over 7 years. And for me, when I think about motivating others and really feeling motivated myself, it's that aha moment, that light bulb moment, that piece of helping someone figure something out. And then once they figure it out, they start to flourish because they understand it. Their buy-in is there. They feel more urge and willingness to do something because now they have a stake in it. They have skin in the game. And it's a hard-fought process to get someone who doesn't have that, or they're trying to put the pieces together, like a new person on the team or someone trying to learn something, and they're fighting all these different things they don't have experience in.
Or somebody that just never was supported.
Or someone that was never supported, and I support them in different ways, and through that motivation factor, once they finally figure it out, now they're contributing in different ways. Their team's more engaged with them, they're more engaged with their team back, and then that's what inspires me to constantly build this cycle to get from point A to point B, and then watch them decide where they're going to go next, because I handed them the world, they figured it out, and now they can do whatever they want within reason, and maybe they've opened up opportunities that they never thought possible. That's what drives me every day.
I think for me, at least what initially drove me into leadership is that when I was hourly, I was part of a team that I think had tons of talent. There were a lot of very talented people with the drive to be the best team in our network. And there were a handful of problematic performers who kind of brought the rest of the team down in a pretty major way, were major obstacles to the overall performance of the team. And for me, who wanted us to be the best team, it was incredibly disheartening. It felt like nothing you did mattered, and there was no way to make us as a team succeed. We would always be under the microscope of, our boss's boss, because we would never be where we needed to be if we can't bring everyone along this path. And it felt like the leader that I had at the time wasn't interested in bringing everybody else along the path. In fact, I'll be honest, I'm not sure what they were interested in. I couldn't tell you to this day. I don't think I could tell you what their goal was in that role. And that was so incredibly frustrating for me. And I think I started to look at leadership as a way where I could maybe try to build a team where people don't have that, where people can succeed, can be in an environment where they can succeed together, where everybody's moving the same direction to achieve that goal. And I think that's what motivated me to do that, is I wanted to make a positive difference on my team by taking away some of those obstacles and helping move everyone forward.
a lot of my motivation as a leader has come from the fact that, having, some self-esteem issues and recognizing that and seeing that in other people and wanting to be that leader that helped build them up and help build their confidence, and at the same time building my own. And that is a double-edged sword, because not everybody wants to be motivated, number one, and number two, people can use that against you. They can make you think they're coming along, and then their true colors show. And you're at a point where you've let something go too far with good intentions. And now you're in a position where it is incredibly difficult to right that ship. Incredibly hard to right that ship.
Can I ask a question?
Do it.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask, I think the statement that you just made is really interesting to me. So you said some people don't want to be motivated. And I'm not saying I disagree, but I think that that's a perfect time to ask the question. When we talk about motivation, what are we really talking about? I mean, we all hear the word motivation. I think we all kind of have our own idea of what it means. But for the purposes of our discussion, what are we really talking about when we say motivation?
I want somebody to want to be there. And I want to be that partial reason why somebody wants to be there. I've had leaders in my past as an hourly person that made me want to work harder for them. I want to make that person look good because they took the time to invest in me. And that's what I was trying to give back, or what I've been trying to give back.
So trying to unlock that inner drive in somebody and figure out what makes them want to do more.
Correct.
What about you, Robbie? What do you kind of casually, informally define motivation as? What do you think of motivation as being?
The want and the urge to do something greater than what you're currently doing, and to see something come to fruition, to ultimately figure something out. We all have drives, we all have wants, we all have needs, but do we really know what those wants, those drives, and those needs are? I mean, that takes a moment of reflection for all of us to figure out what really do we want to do. Where do we where do we see ourselves in the world? Do we fit in certain criteria, or are we destined for something else? We just haven't figured it out yet.
One of the things that I've heard a lot at where I work from people in my department is that a previous leader had described our department as being unskilled labor. And, a lot of people took that to heart. And I had somebody explain it to me in a different way, and where that leader probably was going with it and failed to connect the dots. But just because you are a awesome technician or a very skilled equipment operator, I believe what they were trying to say is, we're unskilled labor because we didn't go to a trade school. We're not an electrician. We're not a skilled tradesman.
Mm-hmm.
And those dots were never connected.
Well, I think that's really hard to leave it at that point, is to just say it's unskilled. You have to, like you said, define what does it mean to be unskilled, to show people what you're all the way saying.
I was a very skilled operator. That did not equate into being a skilled leader.
No. I can see that.
So what motivated me to push harder to learn those skills, and I'm still learning those skills, and I'm learning a lot of hard lessons along the way, but it doesn't mean you're not skilled at what you do. It means, I truly believe they meant you didn't go to school for this, so you're building skills on the fly.
Yeah, you're learning on the job. OTJ, right?
OJT.
OJT.
On the job training.
On job training. So OJT is very different from in school training. Like
but I don't think is necessarily any less valuable.
No,
right?
No, it's not. It's
you-
not less valuable.
Because you're
the School
learning
of Hard
it-
Knocks has been around for a really long time.
Yeah,
and it may be a more difficult and potentially slower way to learn, but it doesn't mean that you won't learn lessons quite a bit more valuable even than you might learn in school.
Well, I mean, if you really think about it, learning on the job, it's real world. There's things that ebb and flow and transition. And when you're learning in a book, the leaders that learn in a book, that go to school to be leaders, they read all these examples, all these things that are tried and true methods, but there's no real world application for it until they physically do it. And then they have to take all those points and put them together with the actual examples in front of them.
And I've got a great story that I think illustrates this point.
Go for it.
This is a little bit of a sidebar, and I apologize for getting off topic. But I saw this great video on my phone the other day of some builders. They're in a building. I don't know. I can't tell from the inside what kind it is, right? It's under construction, though, and they're doing what they do. And the engineer stops by to do a visit of the site, and he comes walks over to a bowl on the windowsill that had some pink fluff in it, and he picks it up and puts it in his mouth like it was cotton candy. It was fiberglass insulation in a bowl. And you can see that look of realization on his face as he pulls it back out and throws it on the floor. And I don't think for a minute that engineer was dumb. Right? I don't think for a minute that was what the case was. But that, I think, is a perfect illustration of real world education, on the job training, versus a book learning or traditional education. I guarantee he knows what fiberglass insulation is. I bet you could tell you what our values are, what different our values mean, and all this. I give you all kinds of amazing things with fiberglass insulation that I wouldn't even think possible. But when it comes to that practical application of recognizing the difference between fiberglass insulation and cotton candy in a bowl, yeah, he hasn't developed that skill. That's a real world skill that you can't learn from a book.
Yeah. Well,
right.
And there's a difference between what people say book smarts versus street smarts. They come into play when you put them together in the real world.
I mean, there's lots of theory out there, and kind of some of those, one of those topic, or I guess lack of better term here, one of those things is intrinsic versus extrinsic. Probably can't. Did I mispronounce that? Extrinsic motivation, and how it affects individuals differently. So, would one of you like to kind of clarify on what that means?
I'm going to give that to Jed because he's definitely has the handle on that. That's a word that I don't hear very often.
Sure. I think what you're talking about, Nick, is I don't know if it's Herzberg or Herzberg. So I'm going to say Herzberg's two-factor theory, right? It's a great example of that. Essentially, Herzberg has proposed that employee satisfaction or motivation comes from two different factors, what he calls hygiene factors and motivating factors. Hygiene factors are things that are extrinsic, things that are outside of yourself, right? And just generally a part of the work environment.
So it's not like using a specific bar of soap.
No.
I mean, we do hear the trope of like good hygiene in the workplace makes your peers want to be around you. That's something that we're practiced, is making sure people are doing that.
So what he means by hygiene factors are things like what's your salary, workplace policies, what are your working conditions? Do you get along with your supervisor? What kind of supervisor do you have? Do you have job security? Do you have good relationships with your coworkers? And these are just sort of basic truths of your workplace, right? And it's not to say that you have no control over them, but at any given time, right, you don't come in every day and decide what your salary is. For most people, if you're working for another company, you don't come in every day and dictate what the company policies are going to be, right? These are all things that are generally set for you by somebody else. You don't get to decide who your supervisor is, things like that. And these are hygiene factors, are things that Herzberg said are needed for motivation, but they're not themselves motivators. Essentially what they are, the way I think of them, is a baseline of things that you need to have to prevent your basic ability to be content in your job from degrading. The absence of these factors will cause unhappiness, but more of them does not necessarily increase happiness, if that makes sense.
Well, I've got a good example of that, to be honest with you. People on my team and in my department feel that, the equipment that we operate isn't a priority to make sure it's in top working order. And as I just took over a new team, there's a person on that team that is a known problem performer. And I saw specifically this week, I saw quite a change in that person when I started getting things fixed for them. When I started taking what they were saying and putting it into action, I saw a change in their behaviors. And so in a sense, and so what I'm trying to say is that's correct in the sense that once they had what they needed to be successful, all of a sudden they started trying to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, having the tools to do your job effectively is a big deal. The flip side of that is, I think we've all also experienced somebody who was obviously discontent and didn't necessarily have the tools, but then when given the tools, continued to be discontent with their job, right? Because I think what Herzberg's getting at with these hygiene factors is that their presence is not going to make you happy. It's not going to give you job satisfaction, but their absence will detract from your job satisfaction.
Correct.
Well, I mean, wow, I can't even talk. Whoa.
Well, this is a podcast, so we're gonna
We'll just edit that out.
So when we look at the word, because I love definitions, they drive a lot of things that I think about, and how people put different examples together, use words for different things, but they all have good meaning when we do so. It's like when we think of the actual word hygiene, it's a condition or practice that is conducive to maintaining health, preventing disease, especially through cleanliness. But like when we think of like a business's hygiene or like a company's hygiene, we're looking at practices, policies, procedures, things that ensure that it runs as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you have strong teeth and you brush your teeth every day, your teeth aren't going to get bigger and stronger, but it will keep them from eroding away and rotting away. And I think in that respect, I think you're spot on as far as hygiene. It's for maintaining that baseline of potential job satisfaction and motivation. The other factor are motivators, which, right on the nose, right? And motivators are intrinsic factors, things that are directly related to the job that you do. And those are things like achievement, recognition, responsibility, opportunity for advancement, whether or not your work or having challenging work, and personal growth. And these are things that will increase job satisfaction, that will increase, theoretically, right, motivation. So if you have the hygiene factors in place, or sufficient baseline of hygiene factors where you are capable of being motivated because you have what you need, and you also feel like you can accomplish something, you feel that you have appropriate recognition for your accomplishments, you have appropriate responsibility, right? Enough that you have something to do, but not so much that you're crushing under the weight of it, kind of a thing. That your accomplishments can lead to opportunities for advancement in your career, which will improve some of those hygiene factors, right? That advancement could improve your salary, could have you work with a boss that you like more, put you in an environment where you enjoy your coworkers in a different way, right? And work that challenges you, where you're not bored every day, sitting at your desk going, "Oh, this is awful. I wish I was at home doing something else," right? But you're also not staring at your computer screen blankly going, "I don't understand what I'm even supposed to be doing right now. I'm so lost," right? Having that middle ground where it's challenging and it's helping you grow and learn, but you're not crushed under the weight of it, right? Those things build motivation. They build job satisfaction, and they help you to perform even higher when you build them upon that hygiene factor baseline.
Yeah, and like when we go past Herzberg's, we can come back to Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. But like when we look at self-determination theory, and when we put it to practice, it's the ability of a single person to make choices about how to live their life and to take responsibility for the choices that they make. So they're making their decisions on how to live their life. They have the responsibility, or our favorite word, accountability for one's choices in their life. They are actively participating in those choices, but then ultimately it comes down to being recognized in a group's identity. So being part of something and having that piece coming together.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah, go for
I love that you said accountability, because one of the ways that I've heard that first tenet of SDT described is autonomy, and part of autonomy has been described as willingly endorsing one's behavior. And I didn't really connect those things until you said that, but that seemed to me right now in this moment, that seems like such a huge piece of accountability.
Yeah.
I am doing this, I willingly endorse my behavior, and I will own everything that comes along with it. And you might be wrong, and if you are, then you'll learn from that and make adjustments. But owning that to me, I don't know, I hear that willingly endorsing one's behavior, and I think like, I own this. I'm doing this of my own accord. I'm behind it. I'm owning this whole thing, and that also is a huge part of accountability.
Yeah. I mean, like when we think of small business owners, when we think of corporations, when we think of business leaders, a decision at some point had to be made. And the person that started a business, started a new venture, started some kind of idea, they took the willingness to say, okay, it's all on me to get this started. And if it fails, how do I learn from it? How do I grow from it? How do I take the next steps? And if they were afraid of the willingness to accept everything, then they weren't learning enough. They weren't really taking their idea to heart. And those successful small businesses, those successful now major corporations started with somebody's idea to be accountable for, like you said, everything autonomously about making that decision and being able to push forward and say, this will work. Here's how I can get it to work. And like the word accountability gets thrown around a lot. We've talked about it a couple times on the podcast. A lot of people think it's a negative thing. Accountability is not a negative word.
Accountability is an extremely broad term.
Yeah, but ultimately it comes down to responsibility. You're responsible for something. And if you take responsibility of your life, your actions, your decisions, your path, there's a lot that becomes unlocked to you. When we think about that in the terms of motivation, how willing are you to be able to take that leap and say, I did that. That was all me, good or bad. Accept everything that comes to you, and then to determine, okay, that worked. How can I repeat that? How can I do that again? Or that didn't work. How can I fix that? How can I do that differently?
I think I might add willingly endorsing one's behavior to my vocabulary.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Like when we look
Want
at
to break down the rest of those the other parts of SDT
so like
for us?
the autonomy factor that we've talked about a lot is that willingness to endorse their behaviors, to have that feelings of choice. But then we look at competency. Now, this is a very broad word. It can talk about skills. It can talk about trades. Like we've talked about unskilled or skilled labor.
It has a lot of, oh no, I've forgotten the word. It has a lot of connotations as well.
It really does. Like competency really is about experiencing mastery and effectiveness in an activity. Whatever that activity is, if you feel confident in that, you're competent in that activity. You can. One of my favorite things is if you can teach somebody something, you're competent in that activity because you just proved you know A to Z how this works. You showed someone how to start it, and then you watch them put the pieces together. And then when they're successful, you know that you've got mastery in this because they just replicated good or bad or efficient. They've just done something you taught them.
And that was my favorite thing as a trainer.
Yeah.
To be able to see somebody replicate something that I taught them, and it improved their performance.
And it's a word that people forget about. Competency is a very big, powerful word because like when we look at educational systems, in European educational systems, they don't teach to a test, but in American educational systems, we teach to a test. The competencies vary vastly in public education systems. When you go to college, you have to learn very specific things and become competent in them. They could take a variety of years to master those, but you now have those skills. Now put them into practice, put them into on-the-job applications to see if you have mastered that competency to be able to do that. And then when we go to the last part of SDT, relatedness. Now, relatedness is really important in this because for people that feel isolated, people that feel like not part of something, they're missing this part of SDT. But you are connected and you belong to a group of other people. You belong to something, a part of society, a part of a community that helps you now realize your potential to push forward and to do more things. Did that cover SDT, Jed?
I think that more than covered STT. I think that was great. And I like how much overlap there is between those two theories, right?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely love that.
Between Herzberg and self-determination theory.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of similarities, right? To me, autonomy, having the feeling that one's choice matters, right? That you have the choice. And that accountability aspect, right? To me, that really kind of links in with some of those basic hygiene factors, things like your working conditions, right? That autonomy, having the ability to kind of work in your own way or to work as needed, is to me kind of part of that policies and working conditions, or maybe even under that supervisor, having a good supervisor or supervisor that you work well with, category, or even job security, to be honest. I mean, if you don't have good job security or good autonomy, you may be worried about your job security.
Yep.
Competence, that feeling of mastery and being effective in one's activities, links right up with the motivators. Some of the motivators, things like having responsibility, having challenging work, and having personal growth, right? Not so much that you're crushing under the weight of it, but enough that it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then the relatedness, right? Connected with and belonging to others, connected with and feelings of being connected with and belonging with others. Again, that's part of that. It can be part of your supervisor relationship, can be part of your workplace conditions, and coworker relationships was one of those hygiene factors as well, right? Having good relationships with the people that you work with. It's interesting to see how much overlap there is between these two theories, independently made by psychologists that tell us a very similar story.
Well, and SDT's been around for a very long time. It helped found parts of the European Union from what I was researching and looking into. So just there's a long line of things that this is applied to. How can we continue to apply it, I think, is the important question.
I also want to touch real quick on the difference between autonomous motivation and controlled motivation. I don't know
Ooh.
if you guys kind of familiar with those?
No.
Autonomous motivation is sort of is what you might think of as willing motivation, right? It's that intrinsic, I want to do this, it's coming from me. I'm pushing myself forward to do this, right? I want this for myself. Controlled motivation, or a more extrinsic motivation, is when you're under the gun. I got to get this done. I got a deadline. If I don't do this, I'm going to get fired. I won't get my promotion. I won't get a raise. The company's going to lose a lot of business, right? It's when you're pressured, I have to do this. I don't have a choice. I got to get this done. Versus, I really want to make this happen, so I'm going to go out there and do it.
So different factors that apply to different pieces of motivation, right?
Yeah, just different forces, I suppose, acting on you to make the choice to take action, right?
Okay, I like that.
One thing people got to remember is motivation doesn't always come from a positive place.
Why not?
Because one of my favorite YouTube shorts is from Jocko Willink, and he's talking about not getting a promotion or not getting the gear you needed to be successful, not getting the equipment you needed to be successful. He goes on a laundry list of things that could go wrong in any given situation, in your career. And it's all about the perspective, right? So that all these bad things are happening, but your spin on it is good. I didn't get the promotion I wanted. Good. I got more time to learn. That negative thing that just happened to you can be turned into a positive and become your motivator to do and strive for better. But like I've literally heard people overheard people, in the break room saying, I don't want to be a part of this team because XYZ people don't care. And so I want to be on a team where people care. So to the point of, the people that are around you affect those things, it reigns incredibly true. And it's my job as a leader to, for lack of a better term, deal with the people that are creating that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've allowed it for too long, that's where it becomes hard to right that ship. And that was what I was getting at before is now that it's here, now that we're here, how do we get out of it?
Yeah.
And I don't have that answer.
That's not something I have an answer for either. It's I've experienced that in a variety of different scenarios, in a variety of different stores and different workplaces. I've heard it talked about amongst a lot of people, and you probably, if you're listening to this, have experienced it in many different avenues in your own life. But it's when we look at a leader's responsibility, the word right there, to own this portion, it's a skill that takes a long time to develop because you have to be able to spot, pinpoint, and figure out how to work through it. There's no right answer. Maybe there's a micromanagement answer about how to push for and get the result you want, but then that's leading by fear. It's getting an immediate result. That's not getting you a long-term effective solution.
And people lose motivation because company culture sucks, or company direction isn't a direction that we understand or can maybe see at this time because we've been successful for X amount of years. Why do we need to change it? Yada, yada. And people get stuck in the things that they can't control, and they lose the ability to say, you know what, I can control these factors, and we're going to knock these factors out of the park, and we're going to show our value in these different ways to possibly, and it won't work every time, but there's a chance that you can influence company decision based on your actions, or you can shut down and not follow that direction and give the company all the reason to continue to go with their plan.
Yeah.
I've got two thoughts I'd like to express, if I may.
Go for it.
The first one is a little bit of a tangent, but what you just said there, that we've made money doing it this way for years. Why should we do something different? Always gets under my skin. And I know that's not you saying that. I understand. To me, one of the most toxic phrases is because we've always done it that way.
That's not taking into account market changes. That's not accounting for how businesses have to evolve to stay relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's not to say we have to change everything all the time just for the sake of changing.
Correct.
Right?
Because that's the change that I don't like. Just making change for the sake of making change to show how innovative we are when we don't need to be, because we might be making a decision that's wrong. Because it's not thought out.
But I also think that we can't be stagnant either, because the world isn't stagnant.
Correct.
And if you are completely stagnant, just I found success like this, let me do it for 45 more years and I'm never going to change no matter what.
You're going to lose your relevance.
You're going to lose your relevance.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You're going to be overtaken by other forces in the market.
I mean, perfect example is we've lost several big retailers over the last decade because they never adapted, they never changed, they never met the new need.
Yeah, what happened to Circuit City and Radio Shack
or
and
Toys
Sears,
R Us, Sears,
Toys R Us,
Kmart.
Yeah, like the big companies.
I still have a Kmart camera.
Do you?
I
So
do.
it's when you're when you are unwilling to do something different because it's comfortable for you. It's human behavior and human psychology, human nature. Thank you. To want to do something because it's comfortable. But when that's your go-to answer of, I've just always done it this way, motivation. Are you motivated to do something different? Are you willing to do something different? Probably not, because you have hesitancy to want to change, because change is scary. Change is supposed to be scary because you don't know what's going to happen.
And anything worth doing is hard.
Yes, and I think I posted on the I think I posted that the other day.
Something very similar, if not those exact words.
If you're anything that is difficult is always worth doing. Anything easy, ask yourself, why is it worth doing? Because maybe it's just a routine. Maybe it's just ingrained in you. Maybe you don't need to change that routine, but if it's something that could impact your day to do better, maybe it could impact the business to be better, why not take that step? Like our new team members we have that join businesses that challenge 35-year-old processes of, they raise their hand, hey, why do we do it this way? Can't we do it X way? And then everyone goes, wait, what do you mean do it that way?
Well, let me jump back to that comment, and because I think it is relevant. So Kmart's ad of we were moving into the digital age, early 2000s, and that whole .com market, they did put that ad of I'm going to ship my pants, They were trying to be relevant, but as a company, they were unwilling to change their behaviors, which led them to go into bankruptcy and ultimately fail. So you could have good intentions to change, but you have to change your behaviors along with it. Just because you have an idea to change doesn't mean you're going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my second point that I wanted to kind of bring up earlier was that we've talked quite a lot about motivation. We've talked about hygiene factors, motivators. We've talked about SDT. So I guess I wanted to kind of loop this back a little bit to, what does all this talk about motivation mean to you as a leader? And I think what made me think about this, Nick, was when you were talking about hearing somebody in the break room say that I want to be on a team where everybody cares, right? And now that you have these people who are on your team that don't care about performing or don't care about being a part of the team or what have you, what do you do as a leader? And the first thing that popped in my mind was, I wonder if that person who doesn't care has all these hygiene factors in place. Or is there something that they're not getting that we as leaders could help them get to take something off the table that is reducing their job satisfaction so they can spend a little more time on the motivators? And obviously, right, some of those things are going to be under control. You may not be in a position where you can increase somebody's salary. You may not be in a situation where you have the ability to remove somebody from your team who doesn't get along with everybody else.
Generally speaking, as frontline leaders, you don't have control over somebody's salary. That's dictated by somebody above you.
Sure. But my point is just, right, in any given leadership position, you may not have that ability, right? But you might be able to help them build relationships with their coworkers.
Yeah.
Or maybe, there's something about their working conditions that's bringing them down. They work out in the cold and don't have a good jacket. And, we have jackets you can have for free. Did you not know that? Or, this is where I buy my jacket from. It's affordable and they're good quality, and I think it would really do you a lot of good. Or maybe finding out what motivates them, right? What is it they like? Do they want to be challenged and they're not being challenged by the current role? Is there a way we can challenge them a little bit more? And that may not be applicable in every role, right? I get it. I've worked in environments where, say you have a very strong union that will tell you exactly what that person is going to do based on their job title and nothing more, nothing less. And as a supervisor, your ability to influence their day-to-day responsibilities is very limited by that CBA. And so I get it that those things aren't always possible, but I'll be honest. I sometimes have to challenge myself not to be too quick to write somebody off for having a bad attitude or for not wanting to be here. And I have to remind myself that maybe there's a reason they don't want to be here that I can help them with. And sometimes when I do take that step back and I tell myself, I wonder if I can motivate this person if I just understood what they wanted out of their job a little bit more. sometimes I'm able to help find that thing that makes them an entirely different person.
That gives you a new challenge in your role.
It does, yeah, and it gives me a challenge in my role. It gives me something to work towards. It keeps me motivated. And sometimes it helps, right? Sometimes it works, and somebody becomes totally different because something that was so easy, I didn't even know how I didn't see it in the first place. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can't find their motivator, or you just cannot give them their motivator. It's just not an option, and they're just not going to be a fit for your team. And that's unfortunate.
But now you have to attack it a different way. Now your motivation is to find that appropriate thing to help move them on. So whether it's a performance issue, whether it's a human resources related issue, what have you, now you're motivated to find the negative. And I hate that part of leadership. Because you're now altering somebody's life in the now. Now that could be a good thing for them in the future. I've heard so many success stories over the years of, oh man, I terminated this guy because they were a problem performer and XYZ things that they were doing, and we got him out of the organization. And 3 years later, I run into him at the grocery store, and this person who I think is going to probably deck me is telling me how, because I gave them the motivation to find something new, because I've taken them out of the organization they used to be in, they found something they were good at, that they are passionate about, that now they have flourished in this new role because I took the time to get them out of that rut. And it's hard to look at it in the moment in that way.
Well, I think that also speaks a lot to what you were talking about earlier about sometimes motivation isn't positive. I realize this is probably a little bit wishful, and I'm probably painting a pretty face on something that I agree is very ugly. I mean, firing somebody is absolutely, to me, the worst part of being in a leadership position. 100%. I can never not think about how awful it must be to go home to your family and tell them, I don't have an income anymore. Unexpectedly. I don't know what's going on in that person's life necessarily. Right? I may, but I may not. I don't know what their financial situation is like.
You may have a small window into it.
Sure. Yeah, it may be something we've talked about before, but it may not be. Not everyone wants to talk about that with their supervisor, with their leader. And I, to be honest, I loathe it. It is a necessary evil of the position to me. Something that I sometimes have to do because it's part of my job responsibilities to help people find another place when they're not a fit for my team and we've exhausted all other options. But I absolutely do not like it. But that is to say that but you're talking about being motivated by negative factors, right? How many people, again, not to paint too nice a face on it, but how many people have lost their job and then found what they were supposed to do for the rest of their life, who took that opportunity where they had nothing else to lose to start that business they've been wanting to do for 10 years, right? To shoot their shot for that dream job that they always wanted, but they were comfortable where they were and it wasn't worth the risk. To move to that state closer to family because what's holding me here now,
right?
Or move away from a bad situation for that same reason.
And that kind of hits home for me a little bit, and without going into a lot of details, it's when I first became a leader and I learned my responsibility was to be the hire or the fire or the manager of the team. There was a part of me that went on a power trip where I was willing to, at any instant, let someone go if they didn't fit, if they weren't doing what was needed. And once I had a lot of interactions with some people and I saw what it was, my willingness to jump to that portion of decision making, because logically in my brain, you don't fit it. We've had all these discussions, just the routine of, okay, we've clearly had all these conversations. It's not working. Goodbye. But then when I started learning about empathy, start learning about human connection and about all the other parts of leadership that I wasn't taught when I first started, that became the hardest part. Went from having this power to being unwilling to make that move without a lot more decisions, without more thinking into it. It's something that we have to take with a grain of salt, to learn how to pause more, to reflect more, to take it as a serious moment of, am I willing to sign this person's last check? Am I willing to sign this person's last interaction with this business? Because they're going to remember you for the rest of their life as the face of the company. Not the company that fired them. You're the person that fired that individual. And when I think back of all the people I've let go, there's a lot that I probably would not have. I would have hung on to had I had some other skills in my belt. I would have worked on them with different things and paused a little bit more.
You're saying there was a potential that you let somebody go that had the skills and the drive to be successful, and you didn't give them those tools?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And now that I look back at it, there's a lot more that I could have done for some people that I probably should have done, but in the moment, I didn't know that.
But there was also probably, to play the devil's advocate here, there's probably a lot of people that you did let go that weren't a fit, and it was the right call.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the same token, right? I mean, that's a hard line to walk as a leader. And I was going to say raise your hand, but we're in a podcast. Nobody else can see it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I surely am not the only person who's guilty of letting somebody stay on the team too long because I didn't want to take that chance.
Guilty.
Yeah, guilty.
Guilty.
Like, I don't know, maybe this person can do it. Maybe they just need a little bit more help, a little more encouragement, a little more something. And you let them stay on the team too long, maybe even to the point where now you are powerless and have to start from square one again.
My least favorite phrase is hearing, we don't move problems, we remove problems. Maybe that person's not a perfect fit for this team, but they would be a good fit for another team.
That is what I like to call a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that phrase, we remove problems. You're absolutely right. Somebody not being a fit for your team does not make them necessarily a problem. That's not, I don't like that.
Yeah, but when somebody's been moved from position to position and they haven't been successful in any position, you've now let it go too far.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
apologize. I guess I didn't hear it that way. I mostly heard the problems, and I get where you're coming from, and I'll admit I've used that phrase in my own career, but I generally try not to think about people as problems.
Mm-hmm.
Their behavior may be problematic. The things they choose to do may be a problem, but I try not to think of people as problems just
Mm-hmm.
because they aren't a fit for our team at this moment. But I see what you mean. You're right. Like, you don't want to just take somebody who is a low performer and or has a bad attitude or toxic behavior and just say, well, why don't you go to another department instead of being on my team because I don't want to deal with you.
Mm-hmm.
At my former employer, I saw that a lot, where team members get shifted from one OM to the next because either they didn't want to deal with them, or maybe they'll be more successful over here. And some of those people are still with that organization and are still causing problems for their team, you know. And
yeah, and you know, I think I may be speaking out of turn. There may be a time and a place where that kind of thing is effective, where, I guess, to bring it back to that two-factor theory, right? You have all the motivators, but you have none of the hygiene factors, and it's eroded your ability to have job satisfaction to the point that you've become a toxic person in the workplace or become a negative presence in the workplace. And it's possible that moving to another role, even within the same company, which has all the same motivators but also replaces some of those hygiene factors, can kind of reset your baseline to a point where you are in a better space to be a better person. But you're right, that's 100%, that is a slippery slope, because I also believe that if you're in that there are factors outside the workplace often that affect these similar factors but outside the workplace, and those are things that as a leader you may not, probably even will not be able to fix. Those are things that the employee has to fix. They have to work on. You can mitigate as best you can what you have in the workplace, but you can't fix somebody who is just habitually unhappy.
Yep. And
I feel like this took a weird turn. I apologize.
No, you're good.
No, that habitual unhappiness is something that I'm dealing with right now with, some choice employees, and I so badly, the human side of me, the empathy side of me, so badly wants to help fix it. But I think we're at a point now where it's, I don't know, I think we're past that point of no return. The train's fallen off the track.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out how to stop that train before it goes off the edge. A little Back to the Future 3 reference there.
Yeah. And I've had both those team members on my team in the last year.
Yep.
I've had two different people in the last year on my team who I'm quite certain, I'm just gonna say I'm quite certain, had some stuff going on in their personal lives, or were just the kind of people who weren't very happy people, and it came across very negatively in their behavior at work. And I always give everybody, I try to be fair and consistent, the same treatment, which is, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, right? Just first of all to say, hey, what's going on, man? Like this doesn't seem like you're not your best self today. What's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah, instead of saying your numbers are down, coming in and saying, are you okay?
Well, in these particular situations, right, I'm talking about two individuals who had behavioral problems at work, who have the capacity to be very high performers and have been perfectly pleasant people to work with, who on a bad day have become very unpleasant to the point that it's affecting other people's performance. And I always start those conversations with, are you okay? What's going on? What can I do for you? Because if I can support you and help kind of snap you out of this, then I want to do that, right? I don't want you to be miserable. I don't want to be the cause of your misery. And eventually those behaviors will progress into disciplinary action. And we've talked about this in other episodes as well. At some point you're affecting the rest of my team, and I have to look out for their well-being as well. And I just cannot have this behavior anymore in my team. What's interesting is that both of those individuals got to that exact same point, right? We started with, hey, this isn't like you, or maybe it is like you, but this, we don't want to see this kind of behavior. Like, what's going on? Can we help you? Are you okay? Do you have the resources that you need to help yourself, I suppose, right? And then they both proceeded to, this is unacceptable behavior. We cannot have this continuing on our team. If you need help, please tell me so I can help you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I need to make sure you're okay, but I need you to make a change. And one individual did not change their behavior and ultimately ended up no longer being with the company. And one individual made a significant change. I mean, it's night and day. And the jury's still out on whether or not this is a real change, or if it's just kind of contained for the moment. But it's been about 3 months since our last conversation about their behavior, and it is night and day.
That's awesome.
So I don't really have much of a point, I guess, in that story, other than to say it's interesting how different people will react to the same things, and I think it's also a good illustrator of people who, somebody who maybe wasn't able to find what they needed outside the job, outside the workplace, to be able to come to work in a place where they could be successful.
Yeah.
And whatever they needed was not something that we could give them.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of recapping everything, motivation is a difficult thing. It's a positive and negative thing at the same time. And it's a lot of it has to do with perspective. People are influenced heavily by the people around them, by the people in their, whether it's their work life, their personal life, and everybody has something different that motivates them. So as a leader, it's our jobs to find what motivates a person, and that sometimes is very easy and sometimes extremely difficult, and there's limitations to that. And that's the one thing, if you're looking to be a leader, if you're looking to get into leadership, it's a hard line to walk. And you can be the most empathetic person on the planet, but there has to be limitations to that. And that's something that, my journey, I'm still learning, and that's okay. It doesn't make me a bad leader. It makes me, I'm still teachable. There's still things I have to learn. And that's a motivator, is that I get to learn something new every day.
That personal growth.
Yup, that personal growth is important.
And personal
and that challenge.
And personal growth and challenge, no matter what level you are in an organization, whether you're a frontline leader, whether you're the CEO, or whether you are a person that has 2 weeks seniority in the building. Motivation is different for everyone, and motivation is fleeting. So just because the one motivation that got you to this point is gone, you have to find something new. You got to find the next challenge. You got to push yourself. And if you're not willing to push yourself, you're going to become stagnant and not grow. And I think that's something that's very important to keep in mind as you navigate your professional life and even your personal life.
And I think we're going to come back to add a little bit more to this, because there's a lot more we get to cover with motivation and different things for that. So thank you everyone for tuning in for this episode this week on the Leadership Journal. And me, Robbie, joined by Nick and Jed for this conversation. We'll be back next week to unpack more of this. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in.